Hello, welcome to Riot Act Reviews. This is part of the Riot Act podcast, the alternative music podcast, where we review an album. That's why we've called it that. My name's Stephen Hill. I'm here, and I am joined, as per, by Remfry Deadman. There he is, with his hood up. Look at you, looking like a hoodie.
Yes, I have my hood up at the moment. I'm a little bit cold. It's really starting to turn, especially the last few days. So I'm just a tad cold. And if I turn the radiators on now, they'll clink and clank, and that won't be very good for the recording. So I just thought I'll just put my hood up.
I've got a heat pad behind me, a heated pad for my back. It's more for my back. My back, which is I've got twisty back, so a bad back.
As you get older, those heat pads become just invaluable. Those heat pads are fucking amazing. The amount of times I've had to go to gigs with a bad back, and the only thing that has saved me is having one of those heat pads on.
Well, this is an electric heat. It's almost like a little mini electric blanket.
Ooh,
what I've got.
That sounds nice.
Yeah, pretty good.
We should get them to sponsor us. That'd be good.
Oh, fucking love that.
I'd love those heat packs. I'd just lie in a bath of heat packs just all over my face.
Well, you could have a bath if you're going to do that, surely.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Still haven't...
bath.
No one's offered me their bath as of yet after my call out last Friday. I really could do with the bath.
That much is obvious from looking at you. Anyway, well, that's a banter out the way anyway, isn't it? Today we're going to be looking at heat packs. They're pretty good. No, we're going to be looking at Lana Del Rey, Blue Banisters, the 8th studio album from the American singer-songwriter, the follow-up to Chemtrails Over The Countryclub, the album that she released earlier this year, a record that you and I were very, very positive about, Remfry, particularly you. I'm not saying this threatening. I feel like I'm pointing my finger. You like this record or that record a lot, don't you? You really like that.
Yeah, I really responded incredibly well to that album. It sort of came at the same time as me, I think, getting into her properly. I'd heard so much about Norman fucking Rockwell, which was released in 2019, and it got onto so many critics' end of the year lists and all this sort of thing. And I'd always heard Lana Del Rey, she was like the queen of the melancholy kind of thing, and she always appealed to me. So when I saw Norman fucking Rockwell and all those end of year critics lists, I was like, I probably should dive into her. And just prior to Chemtrails Over The Countryclub coming out, I listened to Norman fucking Rockwell and thought it was amazing, like actually amazing. So I became, if I'm totally truthful, I only became a really big fan of hers probably earlier this year. I've obviously been aware of her since her Born to Die days, but I only really became a Lana Del Rey fan, and like I've bought the whole back catalogue, listened to the whole back catalogue. I really like a lot of it. She is right up my street, and it is fair to say, I think, and it's probably worth saying at the top of this review, Lana Del Rey doesn't have to do much bar be Lana Del Rey for me to be happy.
Right. Okay. Would you like the more... What is the word? I was going to say more reasoned view, but that doesn't seem fair because you're allowed to like something. But I guess the cooler, more lukewarm view on Lana Del Rey.
Yeah, the less positively biased, I suppose. Yeah.
I thought that record was really good, and I've never really listened to Lana Del Rey. I've been aware of her, again, since she first sort of came along with Born to Die. And I heard a few songs that I didn't really like that much. And
there's been a couple of singles which have been interesting choices, I have to say.
Yeah. And I remember sort of thinking...
The lead single from Norman fucking Rockwell might be the worst song on it, if it's the one I'm thinking of. The Summertime and the money's easy. Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Something like that, yeah. And
Summertime Sadness. Is the
summertime?
No. All right.
Something along those lines. But yeah, it's
Okay.
probably my least favourite song on that album.
Neither of us know what it is, obviously. But then I'm not claiming to be a massive Lana Del Rey fan. But anyway, yeah, I've heard songs
it's
of
called
hers.
Summertime and the Living's Easy. That's what it's called, I think.
Okay. Loves her, doesn't he? Absolutely loves her. Anyway, look, I heard some singles of hers and I was like, I'm not really sure about this sort of thing. And really, I suppose around the period Lana Del Rey became massive, supernova massive, I wasn't really paying that much attention to that particular brand and style of music. Since then, with the likes of the Chelsea Wolves and the Emma Ruth Rundles, etc., coming along, I have found myself kind of dipping back into a lot more of that stylistic stuff and really, really liking it. I thought there was a touch of that on Chemtrails Over The Countryclub, which I was like, oh, how funny. You could probably imagine Lana Del Rey. Well, you think like Louise Lemon is in Metal Hammer.
Yeah.
I was like, it's not a million miles away from that sort of thing. And I quite
really
like that. It's not really, no.
Mm.
And I liked it a lot. Now, but it hasn't really made me, I haven't gone back to it that much, and it hasn't really made me go, oh, wow, I really must check out everything else that Lana Del Rey has done, if I'm being perfectly honest, over the last year. But there have been a few of these albums that we have reviewed, like the one that we're going to review now, that have come along in the sort of, let's call it the pandemic era, hasn't there, Remfry? The kind of quick follow-up to a record with similar styles and thematic things that surround it. I mean, the two examples that I've written down, you might be able to give me a few more, are Folklore and Evermore by Taylor Swift, which both feel like kind of companion pieces to each other.
Yeah.
And I'd also say Trivium with What the Dead Men Say and In the Court of the Dragon, both, again, very stylistically similar records in a lot of ways.
Hayley
with
Williams
both,
I'll throw out there as well. Hayley Williams did two records very close to each other, but there's been a fair few examples.
There's been a few. With both the artists that I've just mentioned, I think, and I would actually throw Hayley Williams in there with this as well, thinking about it, is I think they released a great record and then went back and released, actually no, I wouldn't say that about Hayley Williams, scratch that. And then they went back and released an even stronger overall follow-up to the initial record. It's almost like they sort of heard the first record and thought that could do with the tweaking, that could do with a little bit of this. This is no great stylistic change, but we've sort of learnt a little bit from doing that record first time around, and there's an acknowledgement that we are essentially doing a similar thing, but we're just doing it to a slightly higher standard. We've improved upon it a little bit. I think broadly that's sort of what we've got here, a stylistically similar record to the last one. I think actually like Evermore is probably a better record overall than Folklore, but I think the best songs from the two are probably on Folklore, so that's sort of muddies the waters a little bit. I think In the Court of the Dragon is definitely better than What the Dead Men Say. I'm not going to ask you for your opinion on that because, you know,
I think I probably would agree with that for what it's worth.
Okay, good. But those people probably aren't listening to that. The people that are going to get annoyed at you probably aren't listening to this. Probably aren't listening to this review, are they? So it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to say straight away, this might be the first instance where I've gone, I think the initial album was stronger overall. Now, I'm going to not say that much because I know Lana Del Rey, she doesn't take criticism very well. Doesn't seem to take praise very well, if we're being perfectly honest. She's got angry at a fucking 9 out of 10 review that she got for Norman fucking Rockwell. So, you know, I'm loath to criticise her in case she hears it. But I think this record is... I'm not going to have a lot to say about it, to be honest.
I certainly think it's absolutely fine getting out of the way to begin with. For my money, this isn't up there with Chemtrails Over the Countryclub for a few reasons, which we'll probably get onto quite naturally as the review goes on. In the name of balance, there have been a fair few reviews which have said that this is the better record of the two, but I don't think it quite is. I think a combination of some of the songs are new, and I do tend to think that the songs that have come from the newer sessions are better, but there's a little bit of a odds and sods vibe to it, just because there's like 3 songs which came from the Ultraviolence sessions, I think, and there's a song which was going to be released with Miles Kane from the Last Shadow Puppets, and that they were going to do a collaboration album together, and then it got shelved, but that song is from those sessions. And I mean, Lana Del Rey's done this to a degree, you know, had songs just sitting on the shelf for a while and then going back to them maybe 5 years later and trying them again. But yeah, it's unfair to call it a sort of B-sides thing or anything like that. I think there's enough great material on here. There's like some fucking fantastic material on here, but certainly the sameness of these two albums, it's kind of interesting because I sort of agree with you that they are quite similar sounding, but there's quite a few people who are saying that there's quite a lot of differences, rather than go with Jack Antonoff, the producer she went with on Norman fucking Rockwell and Chemtrails Over the Country Club, who did, you know, some of the best material she's ever done with him. She's gone to lots of different producers for this one, and there's a little bit of that hip-hop influence there. It's very, very fleeting, which wasn't really to be found on those last two records at all.
I didn't think I'd be writing Cypress Hill as in my notes.
Yeah. But it's strange, the Lockdown album, because I think in some cases you're right, what you outlined at the beginning of this review, that the second one has been better than the first. It has often been the case, I would say. But I never sort of look forward to the second one as much, because I kind of feel like I'm not used to getting so much material from one artist in such a short amount of time. And it feels a little alien to me and a little odd. And I mean, I suppose as someone who has to work to try and review all this stuff, I'm kind of like, man, you released an album 7 months ago. Come on, give someone else a turn, you know, which is just a sort of frustration for me, I suppose. But it's
it used to be the case, didn't it, in the 60s and the early 70s, that look at how quickly the first few Black Sabbath albums came out. Led Zeppelin 1 and 2 in the same year.
Yeah, but there were a lot less bands then.
That's
Fuck
true.
me.
That is true.
There were a lot less. There were probably under 1,000, you know, in the, like, working in the UK, certainly. So yes, so a follow-up coming so close can be sort of damned almost from the beginning. But I've, like all of Lana Del Rey's work, I've enjoyed this when I began listening to it, but the more I put into it, the more I liked it. And I found myself, whilst I don't like it as much as Chemtrails Over the Country Club, it's the amount that I do like on this record and the amount of quality that I think is really, really high more than justifies it being a record for me.
Let's get to the obvious, and at this point, I guess, pretty cliched criticism from the two of us. Chemtrails Over the Country Club was 45 minutes long, just over. This is 61 minutes long. Straight away. Does not need to be this long.
I do think it's too long. I think that is one criticism which is fairly obvious. This is 15 tracks rather than 11 tracks, and like Chemtrails Over the Country Club, much of the sonics stay in a similar place. It's quite sad, melancholy music, but it works for me with Chemtrails because it's 45 minutes long and the quality is extraordinarily high throughout. I think the quality is very high for a lot of this record, but even adding extra 15 minutes on in that very melancholy, sultry, soulful sound style. It's harder to keep your attention for an hour than 45 minutes with that kind of melancholy, I think. Yeah.
Particularly when you get to what I actually think there's a midpoint in the record where a couple of songs are really great. Really, really great. I mean, I think, wow, it's not even the middle, it's fairly early on in the record. Black Bathing Suit into If You Lie Down With Me are both really, really great songs. But they have incredibly similar choruses. And for me, personally, if you're going to stay in such a similar stylistic vein, I mean, ironically, they both come after Interlude, the little Cypress Hill style interlude, but that is 1 minute and 20 seconds. Do you know what I mean? That's not, we're not in that place for long. We've already had 3 songs of very low energy, very quiet, not bad, like some really, the opening to this record is really good.
The opening 3 songs are great.
Opening 3 songs are great, and I would say it continues to be really great after that. But I did notice myself, that was the first time where I went, these choruses are very similar. And we've been here we've been not stuck, but we have remained sonically in the same area, the same pace, the same feel, the same vibe, the same sort of instrumentation, with the exception of a 1 minute and 20-second interlude for the entirety of this record. We're now on track 6, and the chorus is almost, cadence-wise, is almost identical to what just went before. And I don't think that means that they're a bad, that makes it a bad song, or those, If You Lie Down With Me. It actually is a really good song, but I couldn't believe how similar it was, and desperately similar to Black Bathing Suit. Like, it really, really was. I was like, this is the same chorus. It's a great chorus. The reason that I can tell that's a similar chorus is because I was like, oh, it really lifts the song when it comes in. So it's weird that it's not really a criticism of that song, but it's certainly a criticism of just making your record sound as dynamic as possible. And I think Chemtrails Over the Country Club, like you rightly said, it may not be the broad, it's not a bloody Between the Buried and Me record. And we were talking about Mastodon last week, and that's an incredibly broad record.
Yeah.
This is not
Chemtrails stays in a similar place for the majority of its runtime.
Stays in a similar place, but it was never 2 songs back to back where you thought, these almost sound fucking identical to each other. Whereas I don't know if it's just because she went into a different session and she recorded the song and maybe didn't, because you would think as an artist creating an album, you would go, well, I'm going to keep those 2 songs away from each other because they're really similar. Like, they're really, really similar. And I was just kind of surprised that someone like Lana Del Rey, she's not Avicii or something where who did Cotton Eye Joe, Rednecks, where you just go, well, every song is the same song over and over again. It's not pop punk where you go, well, every single song on a New Found Glory album sounds exactly the same. I don't really understand how that kind of slipped through, and it kind of indicated to me that maybe shit's been rushed, or maybe it's like, well, we have to have everything on here. It's not necessarily bad, and like I said, the song's not necessarily bad, but quite surprising that someone of her talent, of her caliber, would allow those 2 songs, which are practically the same song, next to each other.
This is someone who clearly takes quite a long time painstakingly going over album sequencing and things like that as well. I really want to defend Lana Del Rey with this, but I actually can't find myself being able to do so. But you're right, there are a few times on this album. I don't think that's the only time either. There's a couple of times where songs are next to each other, and I mean, you could look at it one way in that, like, they're sort of brother and sister almost, maybe that was intentional. I have absolutely no idea.
Identical twin brother and sister.
Well, I'm picking this out of my ass. I haven't got a clue, but that might have been a justification for it. I'm just trying to think along those lines, but I can't deny that there is a few songs that are put together on this record which are very, very similar. I think you're being harsh, saying identical twins and all that sort of shit, but very similar. Yes.
Like, yeah, but chorus wise, I was like, holy shit, this is different words to the same chorus pretty much. Like, it's the cadence and the way it comes in. I mean, yeah, it's not the identical same song, but it was it was specifically exactly the same trick. A very low energy build into quite a kind of dreamy, breezy that goes into a really, really catchy chorus, and that's a good idea as a song, and she pulls it off really well. But I was like, the fact that Beautiful comes straight after it, and you go, well, this is, again, the energy doesn't suddenly go whoosh up, and it doesn't really go zoom down, but it is a different type of song despite that. And I was like, you could have put that there.
Yeah, well, yeah, that could have been an option. I think it's testament to Lana Del Rey, though, that even though the mood doesn't change all that much for the record, she does keep me invested and interested for as long as she does. I think it's actually quite astonishing how I'm in the grip of what she's saying, and I'm in the grip of her melodies and her voice pretty much the entire time. And this is a very, very mellow record, so to be able to do that over almost an hour, like, yes, is this record too long? Yes, but am I ever bored? No, not really. I'm never bored because I love being in this place. I love being in this place where Lana Del Rey's singing to me, basically. But I mean, certainly, certainly, Black Bathing Suit and If You Lie Down With Me both have quite jazzy elements to them as well. I really love when she gets inventive and unusual, but manages to do it in a way which still sounds very easy to digest, I suppose. So Black Bathing Suit has this mad jazz drumming over the second chorus, particularly. I think it comes in a little bit at the end of the first chorus, but the end of the second chorus, and it's just like really jazzy and all over the place. It doesn't seem to go with the song at all, but it kind of does at the same time. It sounds like a separate track, just gradually fading in and then fading out, and that's such an unusual thing to do, but it creates a really cool part which I can't imagine many other artists thinking to do. And then similarly with If You Lie Down With Me, at the end you've got that beautiful jazzy trumpet, which it's just really classy. It sounds so cool. It sounds like something from the 20s, a sort of like pre-war kind of era. It's really, really lovely, and I do really enjoy the nostalgia that Lana Del Rey has for some picture, white picket fence Americana vision.
She's an old soul, isn't she? She's an old soul, like Greta Van Fleet. I'm an old soul. Except Greta Van Fleet just are a complete terrible kind of a copy of Led Zeppelin.
She has much more of her own identifiable voice
I don't
than Greta
think
Van Fleet
that
do. Yeah,
Lana Del Rey is just a straight copy of anything.
No.
I think you say it's too long, but you feel invested. I did find myself knackered by probably. I mean, the thing is weirdly, some of the material that I like the most is on the end of the record. Some of the stuff that I think is really, really, where I was like, oh, this is really good. Living Legend, I think, is fucking amazing. I was like,
Living Legend's one of my favourite songs.
Is that a guitar? Is that a harmonica? And it's actually her voice.
Yeah. So at the end of that
song, you
start
thinking it's a guitar, and then you're like, oh no, it's a harmonica, and then you're like, oh, it's actually her voice, and that's an amazing thing to do.
It's the voice harmonica. Again, really unusual, odd thing to do, but her vocals go into this sort of, the microphone shifts into a sort of more radio tinny kind of sound. I'm sure there's a word for it, but I don't know what it is. And then she does this sort of, and yeah, at first you're not sure if it's actually a harmonica or her voice. And it wasn't until she took a breath in to start again that I was like, oh fuck, that is actually her voice. And it sounds really cool, but to have the sort of idea to do that, it's just like, I think that's just really, really, really smart. It's really, really good songwriting, and it's just making something just that little bit different and that little bit weird. But Living Legend is a fucking beautiful song. I mean, that's Lana Del Rey at her best, pretty much.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it sounds really analog. It sounds like it actually has been
really does.
Excavated. That's the
yeah.
word, isn't it? Excavated from the vaults of some long forgotten, 1950s soul pop star. It's really good.
I think most of Lana Del Rey's best songs sound like they haven't been written. They've just been plucked out of the air. Which is an amazing compliment for a songwriter. But I think when she's at her absolute best, it's just like, this song just feels like it always existed, and she's just singing it. And I think that is a extraordinary thing for an artist to pull off. It's amazing. It's extraordinary for them to do it once in their career, let alone multiple times.
Having said that, as I said, at that point in the record, I mean, that really jolted me out of it, because I think you got Thunder, which is amazing.
Love Thunder.
I think Thunder's really, really good. That's track 10.
Yeah.
Track 9 is Dealer. That's the Miles Kane one. And when Miles Kane comes in, like, I'm not a massive fan of Miles Kane or Last Shadow Puppets. I've got nothing really to say about him, positively or negatively, really. He's just sort of there. And when he came in, I was like, that you've opened up a whole new dimension to this record, which has yet to exist thus far. We've got 9 tracks in. We've essentially been in a similar sort of place. And it's not until Miles Kane comes in and you hear a different voice and you hear a different vibe and a different feeling and a different way of approaching this music and that brings out something really different in Lana Del Rey. I mean, I think it's a bit of a stretch to say that she goes full lingering noter on that song, but she sounds very heartbroken and she sounds very upset, and there does appear to be a very strong emotional pull at the center of that song, and it makes it sound almost like David Lynchian. There's a Twin Peaksy, Blue Velvety kind of feeling to that song, which I thought was fucking great. I really, really like that song. After that, when it all goes away, a few songs later, I did find myself being like, I kind of think we should, like, for me, I'm ready to tap out now. I'm ready to tap out of this feeling. And I kept thinking back, and I kept harking back to that song and thinking, you need something else like that to come in now. And Living Legend comes in, and again, I think just because it's so weird, it really re-grabbed my attention. And I think there's good stuff at the end of the record, but I was 11, 12 tracks in. I was ready to tap out at that point, and particularly because you get a little taster of how broad and dynamic the record could have been.
It's interesting you say that, and I agree with absolutely everything you're saying in principle. The only thing is Dealer is one of the few songs on this record which just doesn't work for me at all. Having said that, I sort of agree with you that the record would probably be, well, it would certainly be a lot less dynamic if Dealer weren't on it. And so I almost kind of give it a pass for making the record more dynamic in and of itself. But
I'm quite surprised that you're not into it. What's the, just to kind of to finish up on it, or to well, not to start on it, because I like it. I really like it, and I was delighted to hear Miles Kane come in and just for the whole thing to just be different. I was like, this is... And I do think it's good. Like I say, it's got that Lynchian thing to it that I really like. I like Dealer. I think it's one of the best songs.
Annoyingly, it's really difficult to put my finger on it. It just doesn't quite work for me. And I was kind of hoping that I would grow into it. But pretty much every time it comes on, I feel like it's a bit of a slump. It's not something I would skip. But... I don't know, it just sounds so different to everything else on the record. It is a little bit like when the interlude comes in, track 4. It's actually Ennio Morricone sample, I believe, which has been, which some drums have been added to, basically. And it's nice to break things up a little bit, but it also comes so out of nowhere and doesn't have anything to do with anything else on the album, that it feels it doesn't feel cohesive in that sense. Everything else is cohesive on this record, but Dealer and the interlude, I'm not sure if they do work. But I also accept that if you took those two things off, you'd have a very undynamic record, and I'm not sure that's the solution either. So it's a bit of a puzzle. I was kind of hoping you wouldn't dig too much into why I didn't like Dealer, because it kind of exposes me just saying, oh, I just want her to sound like the same thing all the time, just dour and sad, which isn't what I'm saying. But that's not what I'm saying, because there's plenty of songs that haven't been that Lana Del Rey's done in the past that I've really, really liked. Just so happens on this song, just so happens on this album that the songs that I like is where she's being really dour and sad, which is a lot of them, to be fair, so that's kind of okay.
It's quite a lot of them,
yeah, there are a lot of them.
That is a lot. 15 tracks to me just feels like, when you get a death metal album, you're like, all right already, you like Satan.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yes, it is. I don't get as tired out by this kind of thing as I do with death metal. And
that's because it's easier to listen to this, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can put this on in the background and you can have a perfectly nice time. But it was frustrating for me because I put it on and I was like, great, new Lana Del Rey. And I think I'm becoming someone who is more interested in Lana Del Rey's music because that last album was really good. And I'm hopeful that this will be better, because that's, in the case of Taylor Swift and Trivium, what we've had. So I believe that we could have had a better record, and I don't see myself being able to sit through it again in one. I was putting it on and I was like, oh, that's cool at the start, and then my attention just sort of wandered off, and I was like, no, we're reviewing this. I have to pay attention. So I try again, and I get 6-7 songs in. And I was like, oh no, you know, like we mentioned Black Bathing Suit, and there are times when we review stuff on this podcast where I have written notes for the songs, and I've gone, no, this is a really good chorus on that, and I know, and I'm saying it because I've written it down, so I know that I believe that. But if you said to me, go on, sing that chorus, then there are some times I can't think of any bands off the top of my head where I would go, I'd have to put it on. Whereas as soon as we were talking about those two songs a minute ago, the chorus was in my head.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can tell you what that sounds like now. Do you know what I mean? I can actually tell you exactly what that sounds like.
That's something that I've discovered with Lana Del Rey that I really love. I think her melodies are so powerful that actually, I'd say the first 3-4 times I listen through to a Lana Del Rey album, more often than not, nothing sticks. And then, I don't know, a day later, I'm doing the dishes or I'm having a shower and there's a melody going round and round in my head and I'm like, what is that? And then I discover it's a Lana Del Rey melody from this album. And that kept happening multiple times. And I found that throughout her discography, going back to her albums, that is something that happens. It's a really lovely thing. It's really awesome when you like identify that melody and you go, oh, that's brilliant, provided it's not one of those melodies which is driving you insane, which it never is in these cases. But I find that a lot with Lana Del Rey. A lot.
Yeah, I did. And I was sort of thinking, she's sort of lost me. And I suddenly go, I'm on track 11 and I don't really remember what's happened for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I'd listen back and I'd go, oh, I know this song. So that, like you say, yes, that is skill. And that is a good thing. But it's when you get right to the very end of the album where I was like a toddler fidgeting through a church service or something. Do you know what I mean? I was really like, I'm ready for this to end now. I'm very much ready for this to end. And I don't think anything in it is bad. I just think it is often so subliminal and so slight and so consistent and so unwavering in its I don't mean dourness in it's boring, but it is a sort of low energy dour kind of record.
Yeah. And
I just found myself going, I think I'm ready to sort of stand up and have a stretch at this point, you know.
I think the second half of the record, or the last third of the record, is probably more accurate. I think the songs on there are actually quite good, but I think yes, it's been going on for too long, and my interest in the album steadily dips from about Wildfire onwards, which is track 11. There's a sudden leap for Living Legend, and then it gradually dips again. It's not a hugely perceptible, terrible dip, and that leads me to believe that actually the quality of the material is still very good. It's just, you've had a lot of it by them. I think prior to them, though, I mean, just to take a few, I know you've taken a few songs individually, but the album opens with Textbook, which is a really interesting, understated way to start the record. It's a song about falling for a man who resembles her father against the backdrop of an era of activism, which is already I'm like, okay, that's really intriguing. There's a faint whiff of Mad Season's Wake Up to this track, with the main melody played on bass, and I think it's some accompanying glockenspiel, something like that. But there's a very Wake Up, Mad Season type vibe to this, which is a very unique song, I think, and it's awesome. I have no idea if that's a track that Lana Del Rey's familiar with, but I got that a lot from it. And it features these really serene, ghostly, subtle oohs and very simple instrumental backing as Lana sings of self-discovery and her first loves. She's got this chorus, you've got a Thunderbird, my daddy had one too, let's rewrite history, I'll do this dance with you, you know I'm not that girl, you know I'll never be, maybe just the way we're different could set me free. And there we were screaming Black Lives Matter in the crowd by the Old Man River, and I saw you saw who I am. God, I wish I was with my father, he could see us in all our splendour, all the things I couldn't want for him, I screamed for them. I mean, there's so much to unpack in just one chorus there. That "I Scream for Them" line is just so beautifully delivered, especially with the haunting vocals underneath it. It's so ghostly. It's almost like something Zeal and Ardor would do on the more chain gangy bits of what they do. And there's a lot going on in that chorus. There's so much to unpack. And I think that is a really cool thing. The way that she can go between those different beats and those different things that she's discussing, her father, the activism, her partner, and do it so naturally and so seamlessly. It's really incredible. The storytelling on that track is just sublime. I think it's absolutely amazing. I think Blue
musically
Banisters,
by the way, I really, it's sort of Dusty Springfield mid 60s loush kind of pop, and it does sound, it's a really nice one. And at that point I was like, this sounds really good. This sounds really sort of beautiful and full and analog sounding, just really, really good. And Blue Banisters is, I watched the video. Have you seen the video for Blue Banisters? Which I think
actually.
Is one of the rare occasions in 2021 where you actually get a song being improved upon by watching it alongside the video, because
cool.
it, again, all kind of grainy footage of her doing up a house and stuff, and it made it really, I wouldn't say it told the story of the song particularly, but it gave the essence of what the song was sort of captured with the video as well. And the song itself, again, very, very instantaneous. Just like, I mean, Arcadia was one where I was like, is this going to be more of that? But when that kind of Arcadia chorus comes in, you're like, so big. So big without
something. It's huge, yeah.
But without trying to be big in any way whatsoever. It's sort of just brain suckers you without really attempting to. It's not Bat Out of Hell or something like that. It's not trying. Far from it, in fact.
I love the bittersweet sort of patriotism on Arcadia, the way that it sort of suggests a patriotism with its sort of it's just about America, but it's, she's saddened by the way that America is going, and she's being like patriotic, but in a sense where she's concerned. And I think the way that the song gets that across, even if the lyrics weren't there, I feel like the mood of the music would get that across really, really well. I think Arcadia is like a brilliant song. It's a really, really strong song.
Yeah, it's good. It is. You were going to say something about Blue Banisters? Sorry, I just moved on. But
well, you kind of summed it up. I think it's a great song, and I like the way that she, like, the storytelling of the track, and her friends that come round and paint her banisters from blue to grey or blue to green, and I just think it's a really it's a fantastic song.
I mean, I to be honest, I'm looking at the track listing here, and the first 10 tracks, or the first 9 songs, because we've got the interlude, the first 10 songs on the record, I like all of them. I really do genuinely like all of them, and I think there's nothing past that I think is fucking rubbish. I was just sort of done, and every time I listened to it, I got further into it. I got further and further into it. But I've listened to this a lot, and it feels like it shouldn't be. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't think a record like this should be, that sounds so nice, should feel like as much hard work as it often does when you get to the end of it. That is my sole criticism, really, of the record. And I think all that would need was maybe a little bit of rejigging on the track listing, maybe a little bit of very, very, very harsh cutting, and turning this to a 12-track record.
I think this would have been a really beautiful 11-track, 12-track record. I think there's enough. This is the thing. I think there's enough good stuff on here to equal Chemtrails Over the Countryclub, but it isn't as good for me because it has that extra bit which brings it down a bit, if I'm honest. But yeah,
just totally down to fatigue, I reckon.
Yeah, But if this was an 11-track album like Chemtrails was, chose the tracks that I wanted to have on it, for me, it would be as strong, I think.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. I mean, some of it is great. Some of it is really, really great.
Most of it is great.
Yeah, it's weird how so little of the records is stuff that I'm like, oh, I can't even really remember it because I just felt like I was swallowed, and that ends up until I've actually started talking about it now and thinking about it. Because I was sort of coming on here and I was going to go, I don't know, man, it's sort of a bit long and I'm not really sure. But actually thinking about the songs as we sit here, and I'm like, well, that one's quite good and that was great. And then I looked at it and I was like, hold on a second. I really like every song in the first 10.
Yeah.
So it is a good record. This is a good record. It's just, I don't think it's a great record.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I had a similar revelation about a week ago when I was kind of like, overall I think it's good, but it's not quite as good as Chemtrails, and I was going to be a little bit harsh on it. And then I sort of totted up. I was like, does this song get a pass from me or not? And yeah, I found 10 or 11 of the 14 tracks were like, pass, absolutely. I want that on the record. Yes, 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 yes. And then I just found myself going, well, I do like, worst case scenario, I love 2/3 of this record. It's just there's a third of it where the material is either okay or probably surplus to requirements. Nothing is ever bad. The interlude isn't bad. I think it's completely unnecessary, but it's not bad. I don't dislike it.
1 minute 16,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I like this a lot. I like this an awful lot, and I think the songs on it that are good are really fucking good, well worthy of her back catalogue. I have absolutely no idea where I would place it in her back catalogue overall. It would probably be a middle ranking. It would probably be like number 4 or something like that. So I suppose I do have an idea, but don't quote me on that. Don't hold me to that.
I don't have an idea, to be perfectly honest. But all I do know is I like most of this, but fuck me, do I want to listen to Huey Lewis in the News when it's finished.
Yeah, well, why?
So
yeah,
much.
You should do that. Huey
Well,
Lewis in the
I
News
do.
is great.
I do. And
I'm going to watch the Blue Banisters video because
You
I'm
should.
a miserable
good.
bastard. But yeah,
Okay.
I'm going to do that.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty good. I think we both think it's pretty good. I've sat down and thought about it because I hadn't really given tons of thought to the individual songs as we came in to review this, and I was sort of thinking, am I going to be? I'll just let Remfry say he likes it. Well, yeah, like broadly, this is a good record. I don't quite think it's as good as Chemtrails Over the Countryclub, and that's mainly due to, the problems that we have already spoken about. But when it's good, it's very, very good. But you still like her more than I do overall, I think.
I mean, I still really like this record, and I still will be returning to it a fair amount.
All right, good. Well, thanks very much for listening. You know which one of us to tweet if you've got a problem. It's me, by the way. You shouldn't have a problem because I do like this. We're going to be back later this week, I think, with Mole.
Yep.
Chatting about Mole.
Yep.
They don't have any mental fans, as far as apart from Matt Mills. He's obsessed, and quite rightly so, because that album is really good. And we're going to be chatting about Emma Ruth Rundle at some point as well, and will be available in your ears every Friday on Riot Act, where we talk about all kinds of things. I'm not going to tell you what we're doing this week because it's not really relevant. But anyway, thanks very much for listening. We'll see you soon.